Hello, welcome to our Sacred Wisdom podcast. I'm Chris Young here with Becky Parks, and today's guest once again is Simon Parks. So today we are doing a second part of the monthly spiritual topic podcast on our topic on ley lines, standing stones, and monuments. So welcome to all of our viewers, and over to Becky.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, so the first question today is, it is told that black goo came to the Earth as kind of destructive consciousness of a former planet, whilst white goo is flowing through the ley lines, in brackets veins, of Gaia as her consciousness. Is this true? And may you comment on the possible destructive effect of black goo?
Well, I think one of the first commentators in modern times to talk about it was Miles Johnson. Maybe 10 years ago, he did quite a big discussion on that. And I'm not clear on white goo. I think that the material of the earth is oil, and therefore we shouldn't assume that black is bad and white is good. And that's possibly a bit of a misnomer here. Certainly, the concept of black goo is not natural to the Earth. It is alien. It did arrive on a spacecraft and escaped. And I don't mean like a lion might escape, but it certainly isn't natural to the planet. There were some issues with the Falklands. It's often said that the Falklands War was associated with that. The problem with black goo is it has a form of consciousness. It's a sort of a liquidy, semi-organic AI, for want of a better word. And in fact, there have been a number of experiments to try to not communicate with it, although they have tried to do that, but to actually use it as an AI generator. And this is a different sort of AI from the one that we currently are aware of. So there is a natural goo, can we just call it that? There's a natural one, which is natural to the planet. And the negative one literally is, it's a bit like grey squirrels and red squirrels, if anybody knows about that, and the British Isles. So that's my answer for that.
Can I just ask a question to do with that? Because in the past, I'd understood that the oil is like the Earth's natural, maybe her blood, or it's something that could be regenerated.
Yes.
Although officially it's from, decomposed trees. It's like a liquid version of coal.
Yes.
But others say that it can be regenerated, and there's like a never-ending pot of it somewhere.
Yes.
And flowing around the Earth. I
Yes.
never heard of white goo, but black goo is just like oil, but it is sentient in a different way, as you say. It's more AI sentient.
Yes, oil is less from plants and more from animals. So we would associate the official line that trees produce coal in the Carboniferous period, or what the Americans refer to as the Pennsylvanian period, and oil, quite bizarrely, is dead fish, dead ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and birds that fall from the sky and end up on the seabed. I think it would take an enormous number of dead fish to make the sort of amount of oil that we're thinking about. So the official line is not accurate, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So were humans responsible for building the megalithic structures and curtain complexes?
What's that? The middle word?
Here in England, we call it cairn. The cairns.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all right. We'll let you off. Many of them were, yes. Particularly in Ireland, Scotland, and megaliths in Cornwall, that's Cornwall in the southwest of England. Those structures were most likely in the Neolithic period, 4,000 years ago, and they would have been created by people. The question gets difficult when we start looking at slabs of stone that weigh an incredible amount, many tons. Then we begin to have problems with the normal concept that we would have in a school or a university. So I would say that many of them are, it's in man and woman's makeup to leave a mark, whether it's painting a beautiful picture or writing poetry. Some people want to design, and raising a monument to whatever is just naturally part of the human makeup. The question is, where do you draw the line between what is likely human and what's not? But that's generally to do with the size, the complexity, and the quality of the stonework. Okay.
Okay, so did they shape these gigantic stone formations using mental powers?
All right, so what we're going now is from cairns to something. A cairn for the audience can be something very simple: 3 trilithon stones, and that means 3 pillars, and then a flat table-like stone sitting on the top. In northern France, there's a very large section of land with many of those on, and the Druids used to meet there regularly. That's what I'm referring to in the first point, because the word cairn was used. If you're now talking about anything from Aztec culture to the Indus, right across, then we are talking about a impossible precision in relation to the tools that were available at the set time that we're told. I guess we'll get onto the pyramids, but I once, 10 plus years ago, I sat down one day, I hope it was a useful point of my time, and I calculated some calculations on the building of the Great Pyramid, and I actually wrote to, I think it was the British Museum, not the Natural History Museum, the British Museum. I did get a letter back basically saying that my calculations were broadly in line with the official language. Now, audience might be concerned, well, why does my figures match the official line? Because that shouldn't be right, should it? I shouldn't be agreeing with the establishment. But the point was that I was looking at the physicality of it without reminding or alerting the museum to the many huge problems. Because if I'd put in the problems, I'll go through those in a minute, then they probably would never have replied to me. But by saying, does this math look okay, and them saying yes, so each stone in the Great Pyramid weighed around about 2.5 tons. Around about 2.5 tons. I'm not going to get confused between metric tons, which is European tons, and American and British tons, which is imperial tons. Let's just say tons. 2.5 tons per stone. Millions of stones. And what the officials don't tell you is that the workforce could only work 6 months of the year, because the Nile flooded, and if you didn't plant the plants, you didn't get food for Egypt. And they did not have enough people to build the pyramid and also plant the whole Nile. So the official line is they built for 6 months, stopped. Then those guys who were slaves, but the Egyptian won't ever accept that they had slaves. It's just not politically acceptable. Went and planted the Nile, and then went back to hauling stones. And so my calculation to the British Museum was, would I be accurate in saying that a stone had to be laid in place in the Great Pyramid every 2 minutes? And they agreed to that. That meant nobody had a holiday. You worked 24 hours. So 24 hours, no holiday, no lunch break, no nothing. and it would take years and years and years, and you had to lay a stone every 2 minutes. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Wouldn't do it now, not because of laws preventing you from working people to death, but because it's just not physically possible. So what that tells us is that any of the great icon ancient buildings clearly were not constructed in a way that the general public has been educated to believe. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So you're already talking about the next question. You may have fully covered it, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyhow. It says, how were such massive boulders weighing several metric tons moved or transported?
Okay. There is only one way to do it in a manner that would come anywhere half decent to hitting any sort of realistic timescales, and that is to unfortunately, the Americans love the word anti-gravity. It comes into nearly every podcast. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. You use gravity, but I know what they mean by that. A device that removes the weight of an object. So the B-2 stealth bomber has a mercury canister inside and a ring, a bit like the CERN collider ring, running around the cockpit or the canopy of the craft, and then you charge it with enormous amounts of electricity, and you swing a piece of metal inside the mercury. And what that does is that has a very interesting effect on the B-2 bomber. It reduces its weight by about 30%. It's all absolutely top secret. But the point about this is that if you have less weight, you can stay up for longer. And the B-2 was a bit like the old British Canberra, which the Americans bought and built under license because it could endure for a very long time without having to refuel. This is before in-flight refueling. And also, if you have a stealth aircraft, you don't necessarily want a non-stealth tanker refueling the stealth aircraft. Now, I'm not suggesting that people put mercury tubes around great blocks of stone. What I'm saying is that there is a form of back-engineered technology which the Americans have had for 40 plus years, which reduces the weight of objects. So we will know that that technology has either been gifted or taken through crashed retrieval. So therefore we can fairly clearly surmise that what is originally the technology was 20 million times better than what we've got. So there was some way of projecting a beam onto an extant object, and therefore not just reducing its weight, but doing something that it became, I don't know the scientific term for this, but equal to the push or pull of the Earth. So in other words, if you just did that, it should just slowly move in that direction. And that is actually what I believe was used. How that was done, how it was used, I have no idea. But that is my belief with how these stones were used. Okay.
Okay, thank you. The next question's in a few parts, so I can do them one at a time.
Thank you.
What spiritual energy or consciousness do standing stones hold?
That's an interesting one. There are two parts of this. One would be the natural earth herself. So any stone that is carved or broken away from the earth doesn't die. It doesn't die. It has the consciousness that it was connected to, and it's a standalone object now. So it is in itself. Whether it can talk to the earth, that I don't know, but I will know that it maintains the pattern that it had up to the moment it was broken. That's the first bit. The second bit, it was possible for druids, let's just call them magicians, to actually impart their own thought processes, which were not anti the earth. They weren't negative to Gaia. That's why it would work. So they could then impart their own thought pattern onto the carrier wave of the natural earth frequency. So a standing stone would have the Earth's frequency, and whoever, if it happened in that case, whoever was communicating or programming is probably a better word, that particular stone.
Okay, so but also that happens with crystal skulls, but even to a greater extent, where whole things are
Well, the
placed.
crystal skulls originated from the lower fourth dimension. We say Cyrus, and then there's the word Sirius, but they are literally communication devices.
Mm.
And I've talked about how in the Lord of the Rings, or 10 years ago, how in the book of J.R. Tolkien, the Palantir were crystal balls, which, remember that J.R. Tolkien was a true member of the Illuminati, was far more knowledgeable than he would let on. But in the story of Lord of the Rings, people like Saruman, Sauron, the Steward of Gondor would use these crystal balls. Well, the crystal skulls were communication devices. And so they had already been pre-programmed with a default frequency. The difference between them as a communication tool and the standing stone was that they were not pre-programmed in the same way. So, for instance, if you were to look at a standing stone in one location and then 100 miles away, there's no guarantee that they would both be programmed to work together. They could be independent. Okay.
Okay, thanks. So are standing stones living beings, antennas for earth sky energies, or places to connect with ancestors, fairies, or deities?
I can't call them beings because they are from the earth, so they would carry a consciousness from the earth. So because they're not organic, I can't refer to them as being, but I can refer to them as consciousness. So what would happen is if there was a higher force, a more positive higher force, then you would naturally have a series of helpers or assistants in a particular area. That might be elementals to fine tune or maintain the balance, because that's what those entities, those beings were for, to maintain the balance of that particular turbo generator, for want of a better word. So I think, I go along with that. I'm just a bit picky really on some of the elements of the question. So by and large, yes.
Okay, and the final part of this question is, why do many report feeling profound peace, renewal, or palpable power near them?
I actually think it's less to do with the individual's point of pickup, and I think it's more to do with what's there. Those machines, I call them machines, are designed to do. If it's designed to maintain an idyll, a Garden of Eden, then it will have that very gentle, peaceful environment. Because if it's sending out that frequency, what it should be doing is keeping hate and disorder at bay. So it projects out for I don't know how many meters or miles or what have you, and then within that framework of that bubble of protection, that's what creates, while the negative forces beat on the outside of it. For those who are reporting something feels very powerful, well, that's because it's a generator, it's a dynamo, and its job is completely different. Okay.
Thank you. This is a multiple part question too. So the first part, why were standing stones erected along ley lines or in alignments?
Some of them were, without question of a doubt, because those energy lines, many of them were there with the creation of the earth. But in some cases, the objects were placed and then original lines were diverted from their running course, or new ones were put in place. So you have the option of using what's there. But let's say, for instance, use an analogy in Great Britain where the Romans conquered Britain and they wanted to run a road from one place to another, they would always go for a straight line. Well, the chances of that having an energy line underneath it are pretty remote. So what they would do in terms of objects on ley lines is that they would be straight lines, but they would sort of go all over the place because they were naturally following the energy field. However, there are instances where these objects were laid out, and then an energy field was bent. Try to give people some sort of picture on this. Those of you who might have seen camera work where you've got a magnet, and then those bits of metal, iron filings are put down, and when the magnets moved under the metal, the little tiny grains of metal begin to take the shape of the waves of pull or push, depending, from that magnet. Well, you can, just like in a phased array radar, you can move energy without the actual aerial moving. So you can bend the frequency. So, but I would suggest that 90% of everything is already there, and they've just put objects along, and then they've just tried to get them round corners, basically. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So were they for tracking solstices, moon cycles, rituals, burial, healing, and protection, or as markers of power spots?
Well, we can't argue against that, because it's a fact that some of these stones, as the heel stone, the altar stone, where the sun and the moon are very much in line with the stone. So there clearly was a role to mark that. And certainly early cultures that had lost the technology and were by today's standards primitive were far more connected to the cycle of the earth, and therefore the moon and the earth had a greater importance, and therefore it was very important, not just, as the schools will tell you, to know when to plant crops, because that's just nonsense. You just wait until the weather feels warmer and then you plant crops. It was much more to do with magic, and certain points of deities, the darkest point, the lightest point, and also with the earth, the actual life cycle of the earth herself. Now I'll accept that 100%, because I certainly think that was a role it had. And I think once people had lost the technology, that's what they fell back on. But whilst we were still a technological race, of which very little has remained of in the public eye, these devices had a completely different role. They were either creators of power, communication devices, or monitors. There is absolutely no way that Stonehenge would be built in a circle, other than for think about CERN. The Hadron Collider is a circle. If you start with energy in a circle, you just boost it and it goes around faster and faster and faster. And I want people to think about the stones capping, many of them have fallen down now, but capping that, and that the energy would just run around that faster and faster, like a cyclotron. And then you've got, not too far away, Avebury Ring, which is not built in a circle, but it's built in a long line. Well, that's like a gun. That's where you shoot your energy out. It's the same way in the Great Pyramid that you have the stairs going up to the King's Chamber. That was
Avebury
like a gun.
Ring isn't a circle. It's just an
Yes, but it's got an
enormous
avenue.
circle.
It's got a big avenue.
Yeah, oh yeah, it does have an avenue as well, but it
Yeah,
does
but
basically, it is a big circle. But
it is. But
we've been to standing stones in North Yorkshire that are in a straight line.
yeah, well, in Avebury, it is famous for the avenue. That's, if you were to look at any Google or Wikipedia or anything like that, it will talk about the avenue of stones. And that's very important, because it was the avenue that Stonehenge did not have. It did have a much smaller circle, but it had an avenue. And there's a very interesting point, because the role of Avebury was very different from the role of Stonehenge. And that's why Avebury was given this channel with the two stones either side. In the Great Pyramid, it was crystals either side, because the technology was much more advanced. But in Britain, the loss of that technology at that level meant, like Atlantis had all gone, meant that they were using stones. But remember, stones have minerals. They have feldspar or quartz. Now, if you've got stones that have got considerable amount of crystalline material in them, although they're not a fully crystal, you can make those flecks of crystal resonate. And that's what that is all about.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, you just talked about what was their role in the ancient spirituality, but I don't know if you have anything to add.
I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase it?
Yeah, so standing stones, what was their role in the ancient spirituality? I know you were just talking about that.
Right. Well, the key word is spirituality. Everyone would have been different. Some might have had the same role or the same makeup. Some would purely be spiritual. Is a difficult word to use at this time in the Earth's development. I would think that they would have had some form of lesser scientific role. Remember, one person's understanding of magic is another person's understanding of science. So I would say that whilst you could perhaps connect 3 or 4 stone objects and say that they were linked, then therefore they must share some form of commonality. There would be other objects that don't appear to be connected or joined that would have a different aspect. And I think that's part of the beauty of it, that, you know, over many thousands of years, some objects were built with that in mind, and some were just, I'm going to build this because I want to communicate with the moon. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. So the next question has 2 parts as well.
Okay.
When did the megalithic age take place?
Well, officially.
Yeah.
Well,
And really?
oh God. Well, it's quite interesting because the difficulty is if you try to, and you can do it, you can get a uranium or a some form of atomic reading from some rocks, but all they'll tell you is when the rock was formed. So it might be like, 500 million years ago. And you can't actually date an object unless, someone's dug a hole in the ground and you can somehow go down to that and, I don't know, get the organic material, or you can find an insect that died, 500,000 years ago. But if they could do that, they wouldn't go public with it because it would be too shocking. And so the official line would be something around 1,800 years BC to about 7,000 years BC. After that, you're going to the flood. The flood was about 15,000 years ago. So by about 12,000 years ago, then greenery was coming back. So the Ark had already landed on Mount Ararat, and farming was in process. So the waters began to recede about 12,000 years BC. So you're not going to have anything built during that. But then if you look at the Sphinx, we know that the Sphinx shows water damage at its foundations. And when's the last time the desert had water? Well, that would be the flood. So we know that the Sphinx exceeds 15,000 years ago. So, these objects can be very old indeed.
Thank you very much. And the second part is, there are pyramids all over the world. Do they have the same spiritual meaning as the ones in Egypt, since the focus is on them?
I wouldn't say that the pyramid in Egypt is spiritual.
Mhm.
I actually think that the energy is quite dark. I have no compulsion to go there. Many people feel the same way as I do. Others are fascinated and want to research it. And I'm not making a point either way. I think if you've got past life connections with that energy, you don't really want to go and visit again, because it was the time of sacrifice. It was where people were sacrificed, and it was a very reptilian type hierarchical environment. And I don't have the feeling that I need to go back to visit that. So I wouldn't agree that the Great Pyramid was spiritual at all. It was designed for a number of reasons: as a power generator, as a communicator, it was a beacon. It also played a very important part in balancing the natural wobble of the earth. So it had a whole range of very interesting objects. Unfortunately, it's been professionally dismantled so that there isn't a clue left. And just for good measure, somebody went and painted in paint Kafur at the top of the inside of the pyramid, just so that we all know, which of the pharaoh rulers was actually alive, even though that was probably done by a British guy in about, I don't know what, 1920, who went and did it. So unfortunately, things stick. So we've got it down as Khufu's pyramid, and it's absolute nonsense. But you can't tell the public the truth about it, because if you do that from the establishment's point of view, then you've got to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and they don't want to do that. So not spiritual, very dark in the sense of dark energy, but a technological triumph, an absolute technological triumph, which as much as I think we should appreciate the Egyptians, was beyond their capabilities at the time it was supposed to be built.
I just wanted to add, because the questioner was asking specifically about the spirituality surrounding the pyramids, which you've answered, but they all had a very specific function or functions.
Well, there's a different time scale. The Great Pyramid was built before the others. The Sphinx was probably built before the other pyramids, not. And again, unfortunately, because of this, the way it is on this planet, the step pyramid is always shown as, oh, well, that was where they started and it collapsed. And so, it's like the Victorian times. You have to show a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you can't say that somebody creates a masterpiece painting. They have to create 20 rubbish pieces, and then they learn and they develop and they get their style, and then this is just the way it's told. So what the establishment does is show a range of pyramids and say each one got better and better and better, and then they had such skill they built this pyramid. But you see, this is just nonsense. Over 100 years ago, the British Museum, what is now the Natural History Museum, undertook in Great Britain an archaeological survey, and they found stone tools, which is not surprising. They found stone tools at a level which were incredibly primitive, and then they found above it a group of stone tools which were much more advanced, and this fitted the Victorian pattern that you were primitive and you developed. And then unfortunately they then found another section of stone tools above them which were terribly primitive, and for 3 successive digs over 70-80 years, the reports, which all showed the same thing, were suppressed. This is incredible. It was only in about the 1980s that somebody felt strong enough to break this out, and it led to quite a big change, that basically you cannot look at an object and declare it to be either more advanced or more primitive than a similar object. And this was to overcome this establishment of hierarchy that the Victorians had. And so it's the same with the pyramids You know, the concept is that you start in a very primitive way and you get better, whereas that's just nonsense. These other pyramids were much more recent, and they were rubbish in comparison because they were built with non-alien technology. They were built with what the people had at the time. Okay.
Thank you. So before the next question, I'd like to ask, do you think the truth about all of this will come out like in our lifetimes?
No,
Okay.
not in our lifetimes. For much of this, the only way that this truth will come out, there are two possibilities. One is a complete revolution at the top of the tree. As long as the people in charge are the people in charge, it is not in their interest to share power. It just isn't. They just don't do it. The other thing is, if we can evolve, as I hope we will do, and become telepathic, you can't lie anymore, because you know
Okay.
what's going on in people's minds. So it's either these people at the top are going to be completely overwhelmed by a proportion of the humanity which will evolve, so you can no longer play a game of cards. There's no point in playing poker anymore once this happens. So that's the end of the card. Or there's a complete revolution at the top, and the people say, I don't need to stay in power. I just need to put things right. But I haven't seen any indicator of somebody who wants to be at the top to put things right without the power that goes with it. There's always control and power. And this isn't a criticism of anybody, because look at the state at the moment. There's a war between predominantly America and Iran. And whilst our planet is in that energy field, what we are talking about, it's not conducive, it's not right, it's not the right time for it. And you asked me in our lifetime. Well, I suppose if we all go on med beds, then I guess we could say it's in our lifetime. But I would suggest to you that it's quite a long way down the road. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Are pyramids ever thought of as energy sources or charging stations for spacecraft?
They were not charging stations for spacecraft, but they were energy generators for other tasks which they were designed for. They were not designed to send energy. It is just conceivable that they were capable of sending, in the same way as a Tesla energy could be sent through the air. It's conceivable that energy could be sent from that, but that wasn't its main, that wasn't what it was designed for. Okay. But yeah, a generator is very important.
Okay, thank you. So the next questioner says, I know that ley lines have shifted because we used to have geese flying north every winter and we observed them from horizon to horizon. Now we see very few. What can we observe in nature to indicate where ley lines are currently? And I just wanted to add, in my understanding, birds, as you know, flocks of birds, as well as dolphins and whales and other sea creatures. I know that they follow magnetic fields. They follow the lines within magnetic fields. So are these magnetic field lines connected to ley lines?
No.
No.
I'm not sure in America, I'm not sure, but in United Kingdom, if you buy a quality map from the Ordnance Survey, this is the government's independent agency, as independent as it's ever going to be, when you're funded by the government, but forget that. But basically, its job is to produce good quality cartography. And if you look at one of the corners, it will give the magnetic variation from true north. Now, for those of you who haven't been Boy Scouts or Girl Guides, if you take your geographical compass, your magnetic compass, and you set it, it will be in Great Britain maybe 6 degrees out. And you have to compensate for that. And if you were to buy a map, the same area 10 years ago, you would see it's changed, and go back in time, and it is widening. Now, you're quite right, Becky, and obviously you would be. Birds follow magnetic fields. So the reason the birds are shifting generally is because they navigate via magnetic field. It's actually how bees also navigate.
Which is definitely shifting, yeah.
Yeah, so the birds are changing direction because the magnetic field is moving. I want to get this across because there's so much confusion. This is not pole shift. There's so much confusion here. This is not a pole shift. Right, let's get this very clear. There's too much doom and gloom. A pole shift is if the north becomes the south and we're all dead. Okay, that hasn't happened. The last time the magnetic shift, so north magnetic became south and south became north. Literally, the magnetic field changed, but not the poles. The magnetic field, that's about 700,000 years ago. And they know that because if you look at where a volcano has erupted 1 million years ago plus, and kept on erupting for a few 100,000 years, when you look down, you can raise the magnetic pole shifts completely changed. So it's normal for a living creature like the earth to have this. It's part of life. It's part of being alive. So birds are moving because they're following that. Now, the other question was, what can we see
in nature, yeah, to indicate where ley lines are currently?
Well, depending on the ley line, if the ley line is carrying a low resolution energy field, I would expect hedges to grow along it, tree lines. I would expect animals like cattle to, because they're not allowed to now, but in natural times, they would just walk from one field to another, and you would see a path created by them over, I don't know, 100 years, and that would be worn, and they would just be drawn to that. Then there's other, which is a much more powerful energy, which would mean that nothing really grew along it because the roots couldn't cope with the frequency within the earth around that area. So get your maps, literally good quality maps, and have a look. What the Victorians did, late Victorians, well, it's actually about 1920, was that they were looking for older structures, not just a church that was built 100 years ago, but churches that were built quite long. And they were finding that certain old objects certainly did follow power lines. So people have learned to build on these power lines. Animals and nature would either choose to grow along it or to be away from it. Okay.
And sorry, Chris, I just wanted to add to that. Often you see tree trunks, most tree trunks tend to be sort of straight and they're just straight up. But sometimes, in a field of straight tree trunks, you just see a tree trunk and it can be any species, it's not a one particular species that does it, like maybe an oak could do it, or a beech or an ash. And it just twists, the whole trunk is like corkscrew twisted. And that I've read it somewhere, and also that to me seems like it's like there's like some kind of swirling energy around there to make it twist as it grows.
Yeah, but it's very interesting you bring that up. That's actually a connection between male and female within the one tree. So what's happening is you have a tree that's either male or female, but in those instances, they are male and female, and they will grow like that. A little bit like the Kadoosh, where the snake is round the staff, which they use, all the medical centers use. So it can be a vortex of energy, which is what you are saying, which starts at the roots and goes up like a corkscrew. But it can also be where the tree is trying to catch up with itself. So it's trying to connect. So it's like male and female trying to connect. There are a number of reasons why. But of course, you won't ever find that in the Reader's Digest book of trees.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So President Trump is doing a lot of remodeling in Washington, D.C., and he talks often about the reflecting pool. Is this pool on a ley line, and was it vandalized because of that?
No, it was vandalized because certain people hate President Trump and they wanted to interfere with the July 4th celebration. So it was nothing more than just hatred for what the president stood for. And they didn't want, see, the deep state, I was talking to Becky about this, the deep state were absolutely angered that it was Trump who was in on the 4th of July with 250 years. They wanted a Democrat. They wanted somebody else. And they were angry that he was the one. You see, we've been talking about energy. And I have personal experience of this, and so has Becky, that at key moments or key objects, it's vital that an individual, if that person is correctly earmarked for a particular task, is present at a certain place at a certain time, because that energy imparts and triggers. And the bad boys were very, very angry that President Trump was the sitting president in putting his energy in at this crucial time. And they lost a very powerful card, shall we say, for the future. That just really upset them, and that's why you've seen some of that. In terms of the ley lines, the whole of DC Centre was laid out by Freemasons. It has the star shape. Our audience will be very familiar with it. So it isn't satanic. It's wrong to think it's satanic. Though the founding fathers absolutely weren't. The founding fathers were members of a secret society, which we now refer to as Freemasonry. That does not make them bad people. You know, it's very interesting when you have these conversations. Nobody wants to talk about Freemasonry and the founding fathers because it's just something too far. But the reality is, as I've often said, I've tried to say consistently for over 10 years, being a Freemason doesn't make you a bad person. Okay. You could be more bad selling secondhand cars, autos, than you would be a Freemason. So it's not about the job you're in, it's about the person you are. So a lot of these, like the obelisk in DC, were laid out with that. What Trump's doing is certain things, because water is a capacitor. Water can hold energy, can do a lot more. We won't go into that now. But if you have a big still, relatively still pool of water, it holds energy. So yeah, he's fully aware, or the people around him are fully aware. And what he's done is he's redistributing or reprogramming some of the artificial energy lines that were laid out, because those lines were never created by the earth. And we talked about this earlier in our interview, where I said that there was a small number of energy lines that were imposed upon the earth. Well, the Washington DC is one of those.
Okay, thank you. Now, in the interest of time, I think Chris will just ask the next two questions.
Okay, good.
We've hardly got any left anyway, but we'll just do
good.
the next two.
Right.
Okay, so Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And the questioner says, I believe whales were hunted almost to extinction because of their role, whale singing, to maintain Earth's chakras and ley lines in harmony and anchored. Is this correct? And which species also play an important role in protecting the Earth's energy grid?
That's correct. Any of the larger whales, the smaller whales don't have that role, but that's absolutely right. And any of the big whales, but the blue whale in particular. Okay.
Thank you. Last question. Are ley lines still important for Earth in the fifth dimension, or fifth harmony, as some call it? Or are they only important in 3D as a fallback for her to help her ascend?
No, well, the person who's written that has more knowledge than they are willing to give out. they're predominantly for this reality, as a safety device, a safety net to ensure that that does happen. However, in another dimension, because we're talking about energy, we're not talking about solid objects, then the higher up the dimensions you go, the less solid things become and the more energy focused they are. So anything that's energy in this reality has a place in a higher reality. Now, the question is whether that energy field would be compatible with a new dimension, because the field was done for this dimension. The field was done for the earth that resides in a third dimension. If you were to take the earth and move it to a higher dimension, you would have to reprogram the energy generators and the energy lines so that they were compatible. They could run, shall we say, in the new frequency. That I just don't know. What I can say for sure is that the whole of this network was purely done for this time, to maintain the earth in this reality so that it could do what it needed to do. See, maybe once we get out of this reality, we don't need them anymore because the job has been done and we won't be facing the same attacks as we are currently. So I rather think it's that, but I wouldn't want to, say that was absolutely right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And that wraps up another Sacred Wisdom podcast with me, Rebecca Parks, and my co-host Chris Young, and our special guest Simon Parks, with our topic on ley lines and standing stones.
The questions were really good. They were really good. I don't know that you'd find those questions anywhere else. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, obviously secret societies would be dealing with this all the time, but in a public domain, as connecting consciousness is, I don't see or am aware of those questions coming up. And I think it's a great testament to our members who've evolved, not least because of you and Chris's work and others, to push this agenda of self-empowerment and spirituality forward.
That's it, and the work that they do. But a lot of our members are very connected with the earth. They've loved the feedback that we've had from our, the coordinator reports, has shown that our members have really loved the connecting with earth and the ley lines, and also the portals and the timelines that we did earlier on in the year. They've had a lot of fun with these and really appreciated the Q&As that you've done. So in next month, it's going to be
we're on holiday. We're on holiday in August.
I know, but like end of August, beginning of September, we'll record another one.
Will we?
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be the mystical beings of our earth. And thank you, Becky, and thank you, Simon. And yes, we have received amazing feedback on these podcasts. And I also just wanted to do a call out for coordinators who are doing an amazing job with these topics. Last night in our drop-in, we heard all kinds of fun, creative things that coordinators are bringing in, and there's just incredible conversations taking place across CC. So it's a lot of fun. So thank you everyone who's watching the podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.